Okay, would you go ahead and be seated and get out your notes? I'm going to talk to you. I don't have a Bible verse for you to go to. I've got some Bible concepts that I'm going to be sharing with you. But before we go into the series for this next several weeks, I do want to tell you when we were on vacation and we were in Stockholm, we got to go to the Stockholm Hillsong Church at the 7 p.m. service. Well, in Stockholm on Sunday at 7 p.m., it's 10 a.m. Yorba Linda. And so we went to church at the very same time you guys did. And so when we were in church, we're praying for you and we're celebrating Jesus. And I thought that is so awesome that at this very moment, our brothers and sisters in Stockholm have started church just like we have. And that there are churches all over the world celebrating Jesus. It was so cool to be in Stockholm Hillsong, and you're hearing a different language praising Jesus. Some of the songs were in English and some were not. But here we were, and I was thinking, here we are all the way on this other side of the world, and there my friends and family in Yorba Linda are worshiping God, and people in San Diego, and people in Japan, and people in England, all over the world, the name of Jesus is being lifted. And that is awesome. That puts a spiritual climate over the entire world that brings divine glory and goodness to everybody. So it's just super, super awesome. Today I start a series called You Asked For It. At Easter, we've been doing this about 4 or 5 years now. We do a survey on Easter Sunday. In that survey, we ask you, what would you like to hear? What topics would you like to hear preached on or talked about from a biblical perspective? And we take those and we take the top 4 or 5, usually do about 5 weeks, series called You Asked For It, and there are different topics. And so this year, the series are these. Number 1 is God, Guns, and Christians. Next week is Angels, what do they do? And then we have the week after that, Knowing God's Will. What are the signs of the end of the world? What do I do when I receive a prophetic word? So these are the top 5 that you voted in. The first one, God, Guns, and Christians, has beat in all 4 or 5 years that we've done this. No one topic has ever had that many requests. And it made so many requests that the second most popular was almost half as amount. So it is like, whoa! So thank you so much for allowing me to come back from vacation, and my very first Sunday, I get to talk about guns and Christians. What an emotional topic to talk about. What a difficult thing to do, and I really appreciate all of that from you. So today's different. If you're new to Church of Grace, this is different because today's topic, God, Guns, and Christians, has been a request by people from last Easter because of the hot topic, the situation that happened in February at a Florida school where a young man went in there and started shooting, and it became a national debate and still is going on. And so it's a pretty hot topic right now. It's a pretty emotional topic, and so we're going to be talking about that today. So if you're brand new, this is not a norm. This is a little different, and I am not going to talk about it from a political perspective. I'm going to talk about it from a biblical perspective, and I'm going to be sharing some things that whatever side you are on, when it comes to guns and stuff, people are either really on one side or the other. There's kind of a few in between, but it's a very, very emotional topic. So don't get mad at me. You asked for it. All right? So in this particular topic, as we start today, and again, you see this is what we'll be doing the next couple weeks. Angels, what do they do? Okay, that one, there'll be a lot of Bible verses, a lot of scripture, a lot of fun stuff. Today's a little different. So when I talk to you today about guns, like I said, I'm not going to do it from a political perspective. It's not a Republican, Democrat thing. Right now, when you're watching the news, it seems that the news media puts across to you that all Republicans are gun-crazy people and all Democrats want every gun taken away. And let me share with you, this is an extremely emotional issue, extremely emotional topic. And I do not want to address this from a an emotional side. I don't want to address it from a political side. I want to address it from a biblical worldview. I want to address it from a national worldview. And I want to address it from more of a common sense. I really just want to help your life be better. I want to help you have the best life you possibly can have, and by just understanding things. I'm going to start this all off with a story that has nothing to do with guns, okay? Years ago, when I was a young pastor, like 4 or 5 years ago, I was new in the ministry and new being a pastor. And I've been a senior pastor, a lead pastor, since I was 24 years old. Here I am at like 26 or 27 years old, and people are asking you for deep counseling in marriage and stuff. And it's kind of tough. You know, you're a 27-year-old giving advice on marriage and things. You got to do a lot of reading, a lot of praying, a lot of understanding. But I was new, and I was green behind the ears in this kind of situation. And I had this wife come to me, and she sat down in the office, and she told me her story. By the time she was done with her story, I was so furious at her husband. I was so mad. I thought he was the worst man in the whole world. I was just like, wow, where do we get a hold of this guy? So I had him in the office, and I was just all like loaded, to just jump all over him. And I started to challenge him. I started to say a couple of things to him. I started to reprimand him. And then eventually he got to share his side of the story, and I thought she was horrible. What I learned from that is there are always three sides to every story. There's his side, her side, and God's side. And it was a huge lesson for me in kind of like on-the-job training, where I realized before you make any judgments, you should try to do your best to get all the facts and information you possibly can, instead of just jumping to conclusions. And I was jumping to conclusions. It's the same with everything in life. Everything in life. And the topic I'm going to talk to you about today is, I'd like you to hear both sides of the story. I'd like you to understand what's going on. I'd like you to hear from the other side of whatever your side is, because I can see both sides. I can see both sides. I can see why there are people in the United States would like to remove every single gun from every single home and in the street. I get it. I understand. I understand the emotions behind it. I understand the reasoning behind it. I understand why they feel that way. But the biggest deal that we want to talk about is, why is there so much talk about guns? I also understand the other side of the people who say, no, it's my right, and I want to own a gun, and I want to have this. This is my right to, and it's my constitutional right, and I want to be able to do that kind of thing. I get that side. I understand what they're saying. The reason there's so much talk about guns is this is really the issue. Is people need to feel safe. When it comes down to safety, there's a whole lot of people who feel safer if all the guns were removed. There's a whole lot of people who feel safer if they have a gun. What it comes down to is safety. Do I feel safe? And then with this entire topic about why it got so many votes is, people want to know, what's the Christian perspective? Is it right for a Christian to have a gun? Is it right for a Christian to be pro-gun? Is it right for, shouldn't a Christian, not have, be full of peace and not do anything and avoid violence of all kinds? So these are the things I'm going to address today. I'm going to go through my notes because I actually spent a tremendous amount of time putting this together and putting some thoughts down on paper that I don't want to forget. So I'm going to look at my notes a little more often than I probably normally do, just to make sure that I get all of it. Thank you for letting me do that. Now, it makes sense if there are no guns, people would be safer, okay? It makes sense. Totally makes sense. If all the guns were gone, that would make people feel safer, and people would be safer. There'd be less opportunity for harm to happen, less opportunity for an accident to take place, less opportunity for someone to use a gun in an emotional place and hurt someone. The truth is, you'll never do it. And here's where reality has to set in. In the United States, we have millions and millions and millions of guns. They're not going away. So your desire or your wish to remove them all will never, ever happen. Even if you make a law to remove them, there will still be people that have them. They're called bad guys. Bad guys don't obey laws. And the whole purpose of us making a law that removes guns is because we feel safer. But the big deal is, are you safer? Just because you feel safer, are you truly safer? And that's what we have to address. And those are some of the issues that have to be dealt with. The problem that we have is there are too many guns. The United States has too many. So instead of trying to get into a world, because it's too late for that, you're already at a place, it's too late, you're not going to get rid of the guns. There are people who are law-abiding citizens who will turn theirs in. For an example, Australia tried this. Not very long ago, Australia made it against the law to own a gun and made everybody turn their guns in, and good citizens did, bad guys didn't. Do you know when somebody wants to kill somebody, that's against the law? So let's make a law that murder's wrong. Has it stopped anybody? Not at all. So we have to realize, simply because we make a law that makes us feel safer, do we have to ask the question, are we any safer? The issue that you have in the United States is there are too many guns already. We were born into a country that already had guns. So instead of trying to remove them, why don't you try to live with them in a way that does actually produce safety? And that's going to be the target and the goal of what we want to see happen. We feel safer by making new laws and remove at least restrict guns. And we think, okay, if I remove a law, if I make a law that restricts guns, restricts sales, am I safer? Again, that's going to be the big deal and the big question. But does it truly make us safer? A person who desires to use a weapon of any kind in order to hurt someone will not change their mind because you outlawed that action. Simply because you have decided to make a law that you can't do something doesn't mean that someone's not going to break the law. That's why they call them bad guys. Let me help you with something. Good guys keep the law, bad guys break the law. You know what just went through my mind? Good guys, bad guys, like citizens and politicians. But this is not a political talk. Not a political talk. But I do want to talk to you about the school issue, okay? The school issue is the big deal. We had on Valentine's Day this young man go into this school in Florida and kill people, make havoc, destroy, and turn our country upside down. A whole bunch of people started screaming, we got to come against all the guns. We have to outlaw guns. We have to especially outlaw the AR-15 because it's so horrible and so massive and it's so destructive. I would like to talk about school safety in a whole umbrella. Over the last year, I've read article after article after article after article of a school teacher sexually molesting or abusing her position or his position with a student, where a school teacher had an affair with a student. And most of them have been women on the articles that I've read. So many. But I didn't hear any outcry that we should get rid of teachers. No one's screaming all the teachers have to go. And we have to be realistic, because a teacher or a few teachers are horrible doesn't mean they're all bad. Nor should we judge all teachers by the actions of few. Am I right? Would you agree? Yes. Would you agree that there are some teachers that are super excellent and dedicated to the good of the school and education and the child? I've met lots of them, far more than bad ones. But there are a few bad ones. So what do? Do you outlaw teachers? Or do you just put a system together that allows you to make the bad ones be removed? Those teachers, let me be blunt. You're in high school, you're 16 years old, your hormones are screaming all over the place, and you had sex with one of the teachers? You better believe the boys are talking about it. You better believe they're all talking about it. How is that influencing those young men and women for the rest of their life because of a person in a supervised position used their position in an abusive way and took advantage of a young man? Some of you say, well, that's not really, he's not, 15 or 16-year-old, not that young. Hey, come on. It's against the law. It's just as wrong when a priest or a pastor or a minister uses their position and sexually abuses or takes advantage sexually of another person, whether it's male or female. I have a friend whose son was struggling with homosexuality, and he took his son to his pastor for counseling. And the pastor abused him. That's wrong. So what I'm saying and what I'm declaring is just because, let me put it another way. Those lives of those young people are marred and marked for a long time, for years and years to come, because of a teacher's abuse of power. So why aren't we doing anything about that? Why aren't we up in arms about that? Why are we up in arms about guns? Because people are lacking truth and education. So let's continue. This is going about as smooth as I thought it would. We make it a law. It's already a law that you cannot have a gun on school property. It's already a law. You cannot have a gun on school property. There's a man who does YouTube. He's a YouTuber. He is very famous. He has a couple million followers on YouTube. And what he talks about is guns. He teaches gun safety, proper use, the difference, does gun reviews, and he is a public school teacher. He has a permit to carry a gun, but he cannot carry a gun to work because he's a public school teacher. He's not allowed. It is against the law to have a gun on campus. It used to be in California that if you were a police officer off duty, you could walk on with your gun, or you could, if you had a permit to carry a gun, you could get a letter from the principal of the school that you were allowed to carry it on gun to pick up your child or take off your child. But now they've changed that and said, no, the principal no longer has that authority. That just happened recently over the last year, where the principal doesn't have the authority to exempt an individual from that law or that right. They just want all guns off campus. So all guns are already against the law. In Florida, it's already against the law to have a gun on campus. But yet a young man walked on campus with a gun. So did the law make you safer? When the law was put into place, it made us feel safer. We definitely felt safer. Good, it's against the law to have guns on campus. I feel safer. It's also against the law to have drugs on campus. But yet every high school in America, you can go and buy drugs. You can get them in any high school. But yet it's against the law. What I'm saying is, if we are really going to do something and make schools safer, make churches safer, make stadiums safer, make airports safer, then we're going to have to be more realistic than simply pass a law and put the blame on someone else. What happens is the people that are emotionally involved in something, and it raises people up, it gets them into action, and politicians use us. They use us. To make schools safer, the city of Philadelphia issued, no joke, they issued their teachers 16-inch mini baseball bats. Told them to use that bat to protect the children. Another school district told the teachers to go out to the quarry and get a bucket of rocks and keep it in your classroom. Some kid walks in with a gun and you're going to pick up a rock? So now let's say you threw the rock and hit him in the head and kills him. That's okay. But if you were a well-trained school teacher, well-trained in arms, well-trained in how to handle a gun, and confident and knew what to do, and then shot the bad guy, you're a bad guy now? You could use a rock but not a gun? What I am trying to say is, let's get into a better place of common sense. Don't use rocks and baseball bats against a gun. Guns are not going away, so let's get our schools safer and knowing where they're at. In a few weeks, the Florida School District goes back into this next school year. It starts in just a couple of weeks. Mandated right now in every Florida school, there must be teachers trained in how to handle a weapon and carry a weapon on campus. Now it's mandated. There has to be training for it. So let's kind of think a little bit more. If you believe that getting rid of guns, in your process of getting rid of guns, you confiscate all the guns, do you really think the bad guys are going to turn them in? And is MS-13 going to turn all their guns in? No. Oh, it's against the law to carry them? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. Here's my guns. Not at all. And what I'm telling you is there are millions of AR-15s already in the public's hands. Not even knowing how many have been made by hand, because you can buy a kit and make one. And it's not even registered. Talking about getting schools to make schools safer and teachers accountable. I'm not getting off the gun topic, but this is something that just broke my heart. A little 5-year-old kid was a kindergartner. He's 5 years old. Mom was helping him do a couple of little assignments for school, and he called himself a bad kid. And she said, why are you bad? He said, that's what my teacher says to me, that I'm bad. 5 years old. His teacher, the previous year, was awarded the Teacher of the Year for her particular school. The boy started saying a few things that the teacher talked about and what the teacher would say to him. And the mom went to the principal and complained, nothing happened. Went to the school board, complained, nothing happened. Made multiple attempts to complain and was brushed off as an overprotective mother. So the mom did something that's against the law. She put a recording in his backpack and recorded the teacher saying that you, calling the little 5-year-old by name, are a loser. And also recorded in her recording that said this: you still don't know how to write? I don't know what to say to your mom. She's driving me crazy. Why is she driving me crazy? I feel sorry for your mom. I really do. She is a little lost. Nothing happened until the mom took the recording and put it on social media. The child is no longer in that class, and that teacher is now under an investigation. What I'm just declaring is we need to look at everything and not necessarily one thing. We are advised not to judge all Muslims by the actions of a few lunatics. Under the Obama administration, we had multiple Muslim attacks. We were told again and again that it wasn't terrorism and it was just a lone person, and that we should never judge all Muslims by the actions of a few lunatics. I agree. I totally agree with that statement. I hope you do too. I do think that there are a few Muslims that are extremists, who are orthodox in their belief, who actually believe in the Quran, and they actually carry it out. Then there's a lot of Muslims that I would call secular. I say the same thing about Christians. We have a lot of secular Christians in the United States. And then we have a few that really believe in the Bible. And they would be orthodox in their belief, and they stand strong, and they actually pray. But I should not judge all Muslims just because there are a few who want to carry out a horrible act. Am I right? But yet, after the Florida shooting, we were encouraged to judge all gun owners by the action of a few lunatics. After the Florida shooting, it was the NRA's fault, it was gun owners' fault, and if you owned a gun, something was absolutely wrong with you. Should the NRA and gun manufacturers be held responsible because somebody misused a gun? Should every teacher be held responsible because a few teachers have sexually abused a student? Should all Muslims be held responsible because a few have shot somebody or blown somebody up? Should the NRA or a gun owner, all gun owners, be held responsible because of a few lunatics? Why don't we use the same logic in every area? I wrote this before I knew what happened this morning. If a person dies at the hands of a driver, people do not blame the company who made the alcohol or the company who made the car. When I told you about the accident that happened in the morning that blocked entrance to our community here for church, no one thought, what car was he driving? Because I want to make sure Ford or Lexus or Toyota or Nissan pay for it. They didn't ask what was he drinking, because it's definitely got to be some whiskey or some vodka or some beer manufacturer that I need to go after because it's his fault. No, every one of you probably assumed the guy drank or girl drank, the person that was driving the car drank too much and irresponsibly drove. And in today's ability of calling an Uber, there's no reason for you to be driving a car if you're under the influence of alcohol. But nobody thought about the car manufacturer or the alcohol manufacturer. You thought about the person. But for some reason, if somebody gets shot with a gun or something goes wrong with a gun, then the first thing we think about is the manufacturer. It's the NRA's fault. They are the ultimate evil of all things. Okay, let me share something with you. This is shocking. States requiring gun purchasers to obtain a license saw a 14% reduction in firearm homicides in large. Urban counties where nearly 2/3 of gun deaths occur, according to a new study. Published in the Journal of Urban Health, the study analyzed 136 of the largest urban counties in the U.S. between 1984 and 2015 to assess the effects of changes in licensing policies over time. The study, which was the first to measure the effect of licensing laws on firearm homicides in those counties, found gun licensing laws are associated with fewer state-level firearm homicides. What they are saying is, when you make a gun owner responsible, crime goes down, homicides go down. I don't know if you are aware, but it has been statistically proven again and again and again in every state of the United States that a person who has a permit to carry a gun, called a CCW, it is a concealed weapons permit, concealed carry weapon. It is proven again and again and again they are the most law-abiding citizens. They have committed the fewest crimes. In fact, in order for you to have a permit, they check everything out about you, including your driving record. They'll look at how many tickets you had. And if you have too many tickets, you're not getting a permit. They look at everything. But yet, it's been proven again and again and again that there have been people who, where there are more guns, there are less crimes. Let's take Chicago for an example. Chicago has the most strict gun rules and laws of any city in the country, yet they have the highest homicide rate from guns. Right. What you'd simply do, let me see. Ernie and this young guy? You stand up. Josh, Ernie, come on over here. Okay, good thing you're wearing black. This is a bad guy. This is a good guy. Okay, and so this is a law-abiding citizen. This is a guy who could care less. And we make a law, turn in all your guns, and now he turns in all his guns. Do you think he does? Okay, now he knows Ernie doesn't have a gun. And if he's with a group of people that like to have a gun to commit their crimes because they're already committing a crime, he's not going to pay any attention to your law, but he's going to help vote and pay for your law to come to pass. Right. So you just individually take this person and you remove them out of the way of having any way of defending himself against a firearm. You've made him vulnerable to an individual. Go ahead and sit down. I just wanted to make sure that they saw you in your black. Listen to this statement. A free people ought not to be armed a free people ought not only be armed and disciplined, but they should have sufficient arms and ammunition to maintain a status of independence from any who might attempt to abuse them, which would include their own government. Do you know who said that? George Washington. What would he know? What would he know? What was the purpose of the Second Amendment? Why was the Second Amendment and not the 11th Amendment, not the 8th Amendment, not the 9th Amendment? Why was it so close to being the First Amendment? Because they lived under a situation where the government needed to be held accountable. An armed militia is an armed citizenship where the citizenship is holding the government accountable for behavior versus the other way around. If you will look at history, throughout history, and we're about to hit it in just a few moments, you look throughout history where the people had their arms removed from them, where their weapons were taken away, and they were subject to persecution by the government. They wish they never gave up their weapons. Take Germany for an example. And I'll give you a few other things. Let me get a couple. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. The first misunderstanding is assault rifle. Everybody uses the term assault rifle, assault rifle, assault rifle, assault rifle. They have now changed the terminology to assault weapon. Assault weapon, no longer assault rifle. The definition that California is trying to pass right now to define what an assault weapon is would require the removal of pretty much 90% of all handguns in California. Not rifles, handguns. An assault weapon is, they want to define it as something that just is a semi-automatic weapon. So, it's a little misunderstanding. The biggest misunderstanding is AR-15. What in the world does AR-15 stand for? Most people think that the AR stands for assault rifle. That's what most people think. That actually stands for Armalite rifle, which is the manufacturer who created it. It doesn't stand for an assault rifle. But there's a misunderstanding. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people believe that only the police should have guns. Only police should have guns. Let me tell you a couple of stories real quick. The oldest story I'm going to tell you was March of this year. Everything else is newer than that. But one of the stories has to do with a waitress. A waitress was serving a client at the George Webb restaurant in Milwaukee. This was June 28th. This is just a month ago, okay? And she was serving this client, and this client was a regular person that came to this restaurant, and she went behind the counter, and the guy followed behind the counter and started beating on her. Just beating her, smacked her in the face and started beating her. Well, another waitress happened to be a concealed carry permitted individual, and she had her gun with her. And she pulled the gun out, stuck it to his head, and he stopped beating the waitress. So if only the police were going to be the ones to have a weapon, what would have happened to this waitress? She could be dead today. Sometimes the police can't get there fast enough. Sometimes they aren't there fast enough. You say, well, Pastor, you're scaring me. Oh, wait a minute, let me finish. Lack of knowledge causes people to perish, the Bible says. Lack of knowledge causes people to perish. I have found people who are very, very much against weapons have never fired one in their life, have never had a class ever in their whole life. I was in the United States Army for 4 years. I fired all kinds of weapons. I qualified in all different levels of different weapons, from handguns to pistols to fully automatic, handguns to pistols, that was really great. From handguns to rifles, fully automatic M16s, machine guns, all kinds of stuff where I was required to qualify in those things. So I had a lot of training. Now, my wife, Suzette, she's had no training whatsoever in handguns or in any kind of guns, and handguns scared her. And yes, I have handguns. I have you break into my house, you're going to die. Because I will protect my family. If you come into my house, you break into my house, forget it, you're dead. But my wife was very, very scared of guns. Scared. So what we did, we said, we're going to go get some education and we're going to get some training. Over the last 2 years, her and I have now racked up over 40 hours of professional classroom training. And now she knows how to handle one. She's not scared. We've taken her to the range. She knows how, and she can shoot really well. And I would trust my life in her hands with her having a gun in her hand. Why? Because she's been trained. Doesn't scare her anymore. She knows how to use one. Why did we go get training? I'll tell you what changed my life. A few years ago in Georgia, a church was having a Bible study, and a man walked into that church, shot the pastor and everybody in that Bible study, and they all died. And I said, I will not be that pastor. I will make sure that our congregation is protected. We have at every single service either police officers, retired officers, or individuals who have been trained in how to respond. We have worked with our insurance company on what to do with an active shooter situation. We've had leadership training on active shooter situations. We have a plan on what happens. We've actually started to think of what do we do in any kind of emergency, an earthquake, a fire, whatever. We bought a brand new emergency crib for our nursery. And what that crib is, if there was a fire, an emergency, something cool, they're getting all the babies, throwing them in that crib, and they run them out the door. Right. Go straight out the door, and they take off. Because we want to make sure everybody's safe. I want to make sure that you are safe in an open environment. We want to make sure that people are properly equipped. There are quite a few people in our church who have been trained and have training, and we're going to make sure they have ongoing training on how to use a weapon and how to protect people. A situation that I told you about, the waitress that happened, what happened at a gas station just a little while ago. At a gas station, a mom had her 2 sons in the back. She was out pumping gas, and a man jumped in the car to drive the car away with her 2 kids. She was able to get in the back seat and told him to get out, and he wouldn't. And she is a person that has a permit to carry a concealed weapon. She pulled out her weapon and shot him in the head. And she said she didn't think twice about protecting her children. I mean, that's a mama bear, you know? But the thing is, where the mystery comes, where all the mystery comes is lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge. You need training. People need to be trained. You need to know what to do. You need to know how to handle a weapon. You would live in a country where people have weapons, and the police may not be able to get there all the time. And you're going to have to realize what is happening and what to do. So here's a biblical perspective concerning weapons. The very first murder in the Bible was with a knife. Cain killed Abel with a knife. God did not outlaw weapons. He held people accountable for their actions. When God started producing the law, He didn't say there would be no knives, no weapons, but yet weapons continue to increase in technology. The people of God throughout the Old Testament had to go to war time and time again. And many times they went because they had no weapons. They had to free themselves. When the Philistines controlled Israel, they would not even let the Israelites sharpen their farm tools out of fear that they would use them as a weapon. One of the ways the government controls people is to remove all weapons from you. You don't know how many people in Europe, especially France, who are telling Americans, don't lose your Second Amendment rights. We don't have them. When Deborah led Israel to war in the book of Judges, there were 40,000 men and no one had a sword or a shield. Nobody had a sword or a shield. They had to go make stuff. Why? Because the government didn't let them have one, and the government was now oppressing them. When Nehemiah was building the wall, he told all the people to hold their weapons in one hand and build with the other. These are believers they're building the wall, and yet they're armed to protect themselves. It is a biblical principle that you have the right to protect your body, protect your property. It is your responsibility to be able to protect yourself. You need to know how to get out of a situation, how to avoid certain situations. If somebody attacks you, you have the right to defend yourself. Well, Pastor, doesn't the Bible say to turn the other cheek? I'm so glad you asked that. The Bible says if they slap you on one side, Jesus said, slap you on one side of the towel, you turn the other. Jesus was referring to persecution of your faith. That if you were being persecuted for your faith, you just take it. You hold on. Let him slap the other side. Jesus was also referring to when you were being persecuted by the Roman soldier and they made you put a pack on and walk 1 mile because of your belief in the custom of the days that they could make you carry their backpack. He goes, carry it 2 miles. Show them the love of God. But Jesus never indicated that if a man was trying to rape you, that you should just lay down and take it. If you have the ability to get away from that situation, you have the ability to fight off that situation, then you can and should. You have the right to protect you and your children and your family. I knew you would love this message. Welcome back, Pastor Tom. John chapter 18, verse 10 and 11 says this, Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. Simon had a sword. Simon probably had that sword every day. They went out with their swords all the time. There were certain roads that were known for hijackings, and they were known for the criminals and the robbers, and they had to have guards to even travel those roads. Simon didn't all of a sudden say, I'm just going to take a sword. He's just getting on his stuff. His sword. The next verse says this. So Jesus told Peter, put your sword away. And shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me? In another one of the Gospels, he said, those who live by the sword shall die by the sword. And what he's referring to here, and putting both Gospels together, Jesus is referring to, you are not going to do the will of the Father by the sword. You are going to have to do it by the Spirit. And if you're going to force the will of the Father, for an example, when the Crusaders went all over the world forcing people to become Christians, you're going to end up dying by the sword. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't protect yourself. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't watch over yourself. It doesn't mean that you should not take care of you and your people. Here's the real issue. The real issue is spiritual. The desire for someone to kill another person. And in an open scene, the dude that went up into the hotel and opened fire on Las Vegas situation and started shooting people in an open field is demonic. The issue is spiritual. That is demonic. The desire for blood, that is never going to be controlled by a law. That demon cannot be controlled by a law. The other issue that we have is we have bad guys. They're just flat bad guys. Remember the bad guy? He was all dressed in black, hat turned around. The bad guys. There are bad guys who are out to get whatever they want in life, and they don't care if they run over you, hurt you, destroy you, and they're going to use anything they have to do it. And so you need to know. Before you criticize someone owning a gun, go take classes and find out about them. Learn how to use them. Learn what it is. The last issue that we have is mental illness. We have mental illness that we are avoiding and ignoring. We are not dealing with this in this country. It is a bigger issue than anyone realizes. There's a daycare owner, this is recently. A dad was dropping off his child at a daycare. When he walked in, he saw the daycare owner trying to hang another child by a loose. Had the child hanging. The dad rescued the child, called the authorities. That lady, you know what her punishment was by our great courts? Probation. Because she's mentally ill and she was diagnosed by a doctor that she most likely won't do it again. That mental illness that put a child in a hangman's noose and started to pull that child up is demonic. And it will happen again. That individual is more than just mental illness. You have spiritual powers that have come in under that umbrella of mental illness and hurting. How about the former UCLA basketball star who recently was found dead after he put this heartbreaking video on YouTube and talked about the voices that he would hear, and he killed himself. Mental illness. And he talked about, he was screaming out for mental illness issues. We have a mental illness issue here, and you have to be aware of it and what's going on. We need to do something about it. Oh, wow, I'm all out of time, aren't I? Well, welcome back, Pastor Tom. So here, let me wrap it up with this. America already has way too many guns. You'll never be able to get all the guns off the street. So what do? Here's the answer. I want to give you an answer. You ready? The answer is education. It really is. People need to be educated. You need to find the other side. I understand why people think that if we got rid of guns, I would feel safer, but you're not going to be safer. The bad guy will never turn them in. Mandatory training before a person can own a gun. I don't understand why in any state. You cannot do this in California. You cannot do this in Arizona. You cannot do this in Nevada. You can't buy a gun without some kind of training. We make you learn how to drive a car before you get a driver's license. We should make you learn how to use a gun before you ever buy a gun. Mandatory training has to happen. The other thing I think is important is there needs to be a federal background check for criminal record and mental illness. And the database needs to be for everybody. I have personal experience in the mental illness issues because I have a daughter that we've been dealing with for almost 5 years now, and she has some severe issues that are happening in her life. And she had been under a 7250, a 7150, a 7350, all of the 50s. In other words, she has literally been under the care of the authorities because of the police in every mental hospital in Orange County. Now listen, I've talked to every social worker in those hospitals. I've talked to the doctors in those hospitals. And they said this, can't you call so-and-so at such and such hospital where she was there for 2 months? No, I cannot. It's against the law. I cannot, as a doctor, talk to the other doctor when it deals with mental illness because it's a privacy issue. So we start at square one at every hospital. Every single hospital. Square one. They have no record because they have to start fresh. And the same thing happens in the federal database, that if a person has mental illness in their life and on record and they move to another state and there is no federal database, something could go wrong. And I think that there needs to be a background check, and there needs to be a criminal background check. There needs to be one location where every state can find it. But I believe, and my last thing that I think is the answer is more training. I think there should be training. I don't want to go to a gun range and watch somebody flip this gun around and like I could tell, you do not know what you're doing, I'm leaving. I'm out of there. I want to make sure you know what to do. My wife and I, we got our first 15 hours of training in a simulator where there was no live ammunition. And it allows you to get associated with it, allows you to learn more. Then you move to live ammunition, then you move to other things, then you move to, and you get, once you know, truth sets you free. And you just need to know. You asked me to talk about this. I did my very best to talk about it. One thing I was glad about, that it's still summer and a lot of people are on vacation, so people didn't hear me say all this. So the other thing is, I got it out of the way. Now we can talk about angels next week because you asked about that. All right? Did you get something today? Did you learn something? So let us, what do we do now? Randy, would you come up and receive the offering? It's good to see you, Randy.